They say secrets can kill. But in this story, the secret didn't just kill one person. It shattered lives. It ripped apart families. And it left behind a question no one can answer. What would you have done if you were the one holding the truth? It was a quiet town, the kind where neighbors waved at each other and kids rode their bikes until sunset. Nothing ever seemed out of place. But behind the walls of one ordinary house, a storm was brewing. The family inside seemed picture perfect. A father who worked hard, a mother who kept everything together, and two children, each carrying dreams bigger than the small town could hold. On the surface, everything was fine, but then came the secret. It started small. Whispers, a late-night phone call, a story told in confidence with the words no one would ever forget. Please don't tell. Those 3 words would become the beginning of a nightmare. At first, it was nothing more than an uncomfortable truth. Something you'd rather keep hidden. Something you thought would go away if you stayed quiet. But silence has a way of growing heavy. And soon, that secret began to fester. One family member carried the burden, the guilt, the sleepless nights, and every time they saw the others smiling, laughing, living life, they knew that happiness was built on a lie. But telling the truth meant destruction, and so they stayed quiet until the night everything broke. The town would later call it the most shocking crime they had ever seen. It wasn't random. It wasn't senseless. It was personal. The victim never saw it coming. One moment, a normal evening. The next, violence erupted. A life taken in cold blood. And when investigators arrived, nothing made sense. No forced entry. No signs of robbery. Just one thing stood out. This wasn't a crime of chance. It was a crime of knowing. Police questioned everyone. Neighbors. Friends. Family. And slowly, the puzzle began to take shape. One witness recalled hearing an argument. Another mentioned seeing someone slip out into the night. But the most chilling clue came from a diary. A private confession written on worn pages. I can't take it anymore. The secret is too heavy. If it comes out, everything is ruined. Investigators were certain. The answer wasn't outside the family. It was inside. Every person in that home was now a suspect. And the secret, whatever it was about to come to light. But here's the twist. The victim wasn't the only casualty. Because in the days that followed, loyalties crumbled. Loved ones turned against each other. And those 3 words, please don't tell, echoed like a curse. The townspeople whispered theories. The press painted the family as broken, corrupt, dangerous. But no one on the outside knew the truth. Only those inside the home, only the ones who had heard the secret firsthand, understood just how dark the truth really was. And while the police searched for answers, the real story was unraveling behind closed doors. Detectives began piecing together a timeline, a web of lies, phone records that didn't match, alibis that fell apart, and then the breakthrough. One slip-up, one small inconsistency, one nervous glance during questioning. Someone knew more than they were saying. And once again, they whispered those words, please don't tell. The investigators were close, too close, and soon the truth would come out. Detectives worked around the clock. Every timeline was reconstructed, every alibi tested. At first, it seemed simple. A family member knew something that could explain everything. But when the questioning intensified, their stories didn't just fall apart. They collided. One sibling claimed they were asleep. Another swore they heard nothing. But the neighbors? They heard shouting, and one described the sound of glass breaking. It was a contradiction that couldn't be ignored. Someone was lying, and when pressed harder, the mask began to slip. A trembling voice, tears that couldn't be held back, and then the first admission. They whispered it so quietly, the detective had to lean in. I know what happened, but you can't tell anyone. Please don't tell. It wasn't a full confession. Not yet, but was enough to change the entire direction of the case. The truth was darker than anyone imagined. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about robbery. It was about betrayal. A betrayal that cut so deep, it poisoned everything. The victim had discovered something they were never meant to know. And when they confronted the family with it, the tension exploded. The investigators pieced it together. The late-night phone calls, the sudden disappearances, the diary entries filled with guilt. It wasn't just a secret. It was a scandal, a hidden relationship, a forbidden connection that tore the family apart from the inside. The victim had threatened to expose it, and that's when everything changed. On the night of the murder, the victim made a decision. They said they were done keeping quiet. They were going to tell. And once that truth was out, there would be no turning back. The family member begged them to stay silent, crying, pleading, repeating the words that had haunted them for weeks. Please don't tell. But the victim refused. And in that moment, desperation turned into violence. The house was silent after the crime, but silence doesn't erase blood. It doesn't erase guilt. And as the investigators closed in, the person who committed the act realized the secret wasn't safe anymore. Because the crime itself had become the secret. Detectives used pressure tactics. They interviewed each family member separately. They planted small details, things only the guilty would react to. And it worked. One suspect broke. They whispered the truth under their breath, barely audible. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. It was the closest thing to a confession, but still not enough to close the case. Here's where the story twists. While the investigators thought they were chasing one truth, there was another secret still buried. Because what no one knew, not even the police, was that the victim had already told someone else. Someone outside the family. Someone who had been silent all along. A friend, a confidant, someone the victim had trusted with her final words. That friend came forward weeks later, and what they revealed stunned everyone. The victim had said, "If anything happens to me, you'll know why, and you'll know who." Those chilling words pointed directly back to the family. The case was now a storm. The media swarmed. Reporters painted the family as liars, killers, monsters. Inside the interrogation room, the detectives had one mission: push harder, break the silence. And finally, one family member cracked completely. With shaking hands and eyes swollen from crying, they admitted everything. The fight, the shouting, the moment of rage, and the unbearable silence that followed. But just as the detectives thought the case was solved, the suspect revealed something else. Something no one was prepared to hear. They leaned forward, voice low, almost a whisper. "You think you know what happened that night, but you don't. There's more, much more." And with those words, the entire case shattered again. Because the truth behind "please don't tell" was bigger, darker, and deadlier than anyone could have imagined. The confession didn't end with a single act of violence. It went deeper, darker, because the murder wasn't spontaneous. It wasn't just an outburst of rage. It was planned, weeks in the making, and suddenly, investigators realized the crime they thought was driven by desperation might have been premeditated all along. The family member revealed a motive so twisted, it stunned even the seasoned detectives. The victim hadn't only uncovered a forbidden relationship, they had also discovered money missing. Thousands of dollars siphoned away in secret. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was financial. And when the victim threatened to expose both secrets, they sealed their own fate. Detectives traced the money trail, bank accounts that didn't match, transfers hidden under fake names, and every dollar pointed back to the suspect. This wasn't just about keeping a secret. It was about protecting a double life. A life built on lies, now crashing down. The night of the crime was no accident. It was confrontation. The victim demanded the truth, screaming, crying, and for the last time, the suspect begged them, "Please don't tell." But when the victim stood firm, when they vowed to reveal everything at dawn, the suspect snapped. And in that moment, silence became deadly. With the full confession and the financial evidence, detectives finally had what they needed. The arrest came quickly. The handcuffs clicked shut, and for the first time in weeks, the town could breathe again. But justice didn't come quietly, because the courtroom became its own battlefield. The trial drew crowds. Reporters lined the streets. Every headline screamed the same question. How could something so dark happen in a family so ordinary? The suspect sat stone-faced, sometimes crying, sometimes silent. But the evidence was undeniable. The diary, the money trail, the confessions, and then the witness, the victim's friend who had been entrusted with their final words. When they took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. They repeated what the victim had told them days before the murder. If anything happens to me, you'll know why. And you'll know who. It was the final nail in the coffin. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned. The room was tense. The family, shattered, waited for the words that would define the rest of their lives. Guilty. The suspect lowered their head, tears falling. Justice had been served. The town would never be the same. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones. Children grew up asking why their once friendly street had become the scene of tragedy. For the surviving family members, healing was slow. But the truth, though painful, had finally set them free. And here's the lesson this story leaves behind. Secrets don't protect us. They destroy us. The words "please don't tell" might sound like safety, but in reality, they're chains. Chains that bind us to guilt. Chains that drag us deeper into darkness. The victim paid the price for speaking out. The suspect paid the price for staying silent. And in the end, the truth was always going to come out. So remember this: silence doesn't erase pain. It only delays the inevitable. When truth is buried, it grows wild. It poisons, it consumes, and it destroys. The story of Please Don't Tell isn't just about one family's tragedy. It's about all of us, and the choices we make when faced with secrets too heavy to carry. Because justice may take time, but eventually it always arrives. Don't forget to subscribe for more gripping, true crime stories. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss it showing up. If you believe secrets should never be silenced, comment. The truth always comes out.